New Life Baptist Church, Compton. I think someone is in the wrong room. Did she bring her music in a grocery bag?
Is she even in the right category? Oh my God, that's not church music, it's genius.
She was sitting in the wrong chair. That was what Philip Stanton thought when he looked up from the adjudicator's table and saw the girl in the third row of the competitor's holding area. Not that she was in an actual wrong chair. The chairs were open seating, first arrival, first claim, but that she had the specific quality of someone in a space that had not been designed to receive her. The dress was a deep burgundy, altered at the hem and taken in at the waist by hands that knew what they were doing but were working with what they had rather than what the task ideally required. Her music was in a clear plastic folder, not a leather portfolio, not even a cardstock sleeve, a plastic folder from a supply store, the kind with the metal clip along the top. She held it in her lap with both hands and looked at the front of the room with the specific steadiness of someone who has decided, before they arrived, not to be moved by what they find here. Philip Stanton looked at her for 4 seconds. Then he looked at the program card in front of him, found her name, found the line where the school or conservatory affiliation was listed, and said something to the colleague on his left in a voice designed to carry exactly as far as he wanted it to carry, which was further than the colleague's ear. New Life Baptist Church, Compton, he said. He said it the way you read a wrong answer off a test. The colleague, James Aldrich, 63, 29 years on this panel and 17 on Stanton's right side, made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a clearing of the throat. 3 contestants nearest the adjudicator's table looked up. One of them, a 17-year-old from the Colburn School with a private coach who had worked with 2 Juilliard faculty, looked at the girl in the burgundy dress and then looked back at his own program. Cora James heard it. She had been hearing things like it since she was 12 years old, in various registers, from various rooms that had looked at her and made their assessment before she touched a key. She had developed, across those 4 years, the specific internal response of someone who has been told so many times what they are not that they have built their understanding of what they are on something that does not need the room's participation. She looked at the front of the room. She did not look at Philip Stanton. And before we go any further into what happened in that room, tell us where you are watching this from. Drop your city in the comments right now. This story starts in Compton, moves to a concert hall in Koreatown, and lands somewhere I think you already know. We want to know every city this reaches. Now, back to Cora. Cora James had been playing the piano since she was 7 years old. Not on a Steinway. Not in a conservatory practice room. On a 1962 Baldwin upright piano that lived in the storage room adjacent to the sanctuary of New Life Baptist Church on Rosecrans Avenue in Compton, California, in a room that also held folding chairs, a broken projector screen, a box of donated hymnals with the covers removed, and the smell of old wood and whatever candles had been burned in the adjoining room the previous Sunday. Her grandmother, Ruth James, had brought her to New Life Baptist since she was 3. Ruth was the kind of woman who arrived early and stayed late and helped with the things that didn't get done if nobody helped. The folding of bulletins, the stacking of chairs, the bringing of covered dishes for the 3rd Sunday potluck, the sitting with Sister Williams when Sister Williams needed sitting with. Ruth had been doing all of this for 41 years. She had done it for 16 of those years alone, after Cora's grandfather died in 2008. And she had done it without complaint because, as she told Cora once while they folded bulletins at the kitchen table, the doing of it was not a sacrifice. It was the point. Deacon Gerald Miles had been at New Life Baptist for 37 years. He was 69 years old. He had played piano professionally from the age of 22 to the age of 34, in venues that included 2 Carnegie Hall appearances, a European tour with a chamber ensemble, and 12 years of studio sessions in Los Angeles that had put his hands on more recordings than his name had ever appeared in the liner notes for. He had retired from professional playing in 1987, when a tendon injury in his right hand made the kind of precision he required of himself no longer available to him. He had taught privately for 8 years after that. Then he had stopped teaching. He had kept playing quietly, for New Life Baptist, for Sunday services and Wednesday evenings and the occasional funeral, but he had not taken a student in 26 years. When Cora was 7, she had wandered into the storage room during a Wednesday service and found the Baldwin upright and sat down on the bench and put both hands on the keys without playing anything, just feeling the surface of them. She had stayed there for 11 minutes before Ruth found her. Ruth had looked at her on the bench and then found Deacon Miles in the hallway and told him to come look. Miles had come. He had stood in the storage room doorway and watched the girl with both hands on the keys of the Baldwin and said nothing for a while. Then he said, "Do you want to learn how it works?" Cora had said yes. He had taught her on Tuesday and Thursday evenings for 9 years, in that storage room, on that piano. The teaching was not soft. It was not encouraging in the generic way of someone who wants a child to feel good about themselves. It was the teaching of a man who had trained himself to the level of Carnegie Hall and who believed, as a matter of operational fact, that the standards applied or they did not, and that applying lower standards to a child because of their circumstances was not kindness, it was condescension in a different coat. He expected her to understand what she was being given. She understood it. From the beginning. By the time Cora was 10, she could play Clementi sonatas cleanly and Schumann's Kinderszenen with the specific emotional intelligence of someone who understood that the technique was in service of something else. By 12, she was working through Chopin nocturnes, not performing them but understanding them, which was not the same thing, and Miles had been very clear about the difference. By 14, she had played her first complete Beethoven sonata, the Pathetique, in the storage room, with Miles in the chair beside the piano and the folding tables against the wall and the box of coverless hymnals in the corner, and when she finished he had sat for a moment and then said, "Again, from the third movement. Watch the left hand in bar 41. She had played it again. He had never told her she was exceptional. He had never told her she had talent. He had told her on one occasion that she understood music structurally, which was not common, and that understanding it structurally meant she could hear what a piece was built to do rather than simply what it sounded like, which meant she could make decisions inside it rather than executing it from the outside. He said this the way he said most things, as a fact rather than a compliment, which was why she had received it as the most significant thing anyone had ever said to her about the piano. Ruth watched all of this from the doorway every Tuesday and Thursday for 9 years. She sat in the folding chair outside the storage room with her Bible or her mending or sometimes nothing, just sitting, and she listened. She never commented on what she heard. She never told Cora what she thought. When Cora finished a session and came out, Ruth would say, "You hungry?" And Cora would say yes, and they would go home and eat whatever was made, and Ruth would talk about the potluck or Sister Williams or the thing the church roof was doing again, and not about the piano at all. This was, Cora understood later, its own form of teaching. The Wentworth Young Pianists competition had been running for 28 years. It was held annually on the second Saturday of March at the Nishi Concert Hall in Koreatown, a 1,200-seat venue with a 9-foot Steinway concert grand on its main stage and acoustic panels that had been calibrated by a sound engineer who had worked on the renovations of 4 major concert halls in North America. The competition was open to pianists between 14 and 18 years old. 40 finalists were selected from regional qualifying rounds. The finalist recital was live, judged, and attended by a full house of parents, music faculty, industry professionals, and the donors whose names were on the competition's program and whose money funded its prizes. $20,000 for first place, 12 for second, 8 for third. The adjudicating panel consisted of 3 judges: Philip Stanton, the founding adjudicator, Diana Reeves, a professor of piano literature at USC Thornton, and James Aldrich, a former concert pianist and current director of the Colburn School's junior program. Philip Stanton had been on this panel for its entire 28-year existence. He had not missed a year. His name appeared in the competition's branding materials more prominently than the prize amounts. He was the competition in the way that certain people become the thing they built, inseparable from it, and therefore answerable to no one about it. Cora had placed in the Southern California regional qualifying round 6 weeks before the final. She had driven with Ruth to the qualifying venue, a recital room at a music school in Pasadena, in Ruth's 2009 Honda Civic, with her music in the plastic folder and her dress in a garment bag on the back seat. She had arrived to a room of 22 other regional qualifiers, all of whom had programs listing their conservatory affiliation or their private coach's name or both. She had filled in the school/coach line on her registration form as New Life Baptist Church/G. Miles. The registration coordinator had looked at this and then looked at Cora and typed it in without comment. She had played the Ravel sonatine in the qualifying round. She had played it with the specific quality of someone who has been thinking about a piece for 18 months and has arrived at the place where the thinking has become structural, where the decisions she was making inside the music were decisions about what the music was doing, not decisions about what the audience would think of what she was doing. She placed first in the regional round, which meant the finals, which meant Nishi Concert Hall, which meant Philip Stanton looking at a program card and saying, New Life Baptist Church, Compton, into the room. The finals ran in order of random draw. Cora had drawn slot 31 of 40. She sat in the holding area through the morning and into the afternoon and listened to 30 other pianists play from behind the holding room's closed door. Not because she was studying them, but because listening was what she did. You learn the room by listening to it. The piano, the acoustic properties, how much of a pianissimo the hall would hold before it disappeared. You listened and you filed it away and then you went out there with it. At 2:47 in the afternoon, her number was called. She walked from the holding area through the side corridor and up the 3 steps to the main stage. The Steinway was center stage, lit up, the bench set at the height the previous performer had left it. She adjusted the bench, 2 turns of the knob, down, before sitting. She placed the plastic folder on the music stand, opened it, found her piece, and set it at the back of the stand. She did not need it. It was there because she had been taught that you prepared for what you had and did not perform the absence of it. She put her hands on the keys, not playing, feeling them, the way she had at 7 years old in the storage room on the Baldwin upright, both hands on the surface, learning the room's relationship to her hands. In the 1,200 seats of Nishi Concert Hall, the audience had the specific restlessness of a crowd that has been sitting for 4 hours and is operating on competition fatigue. The hum of that restlessness had a texture by this point in the afternoon that the earlier performers had played against. Some of them had won the audience back. Some had not. Philip Stanton was in the center adjudicator's seat with his scoring sheet and his pen. He had his chin at a specific angle, the angle of a man who is prepared to be correct about something. He had not changed his expression since the morning. Cora played the first note of the Ravel. Not a chord. A single note. The opening of the sonatine's first movement. A C-sharp in the right hand, spare, deliberate, sitting in the hall silence the way Miles had described the opening of that piece to her 2 years ago. Not as a beginning but as a statement of terms. This is what we are doing. This is the world we are entering. You are either going to follow this or you are not. The restlessness in the 1,200 seats did not leave immediately. It rarely does in a single note. But something shifted, the way something shifts in a room when the temperature changes by 2 degrees, which you cannot point to but which your body records before your brain does. She played the second phrase. By the end of the first page, the audience had arrived. Not the polite arrival of people who are watching. The other kind. The kind where they have stopped occupying themselves with anything else and have given their full attention to something they did not know was going to demand it. In the adjudicator's seats, Diana Reeves put her pen down. She did not decide to put it down. Her hand put it down. She would understand why 3 minutes later. Cora played through the first movement with the specific quality of someone who has inhabited a piece so completely that the performance is not a presentation of the music but a continuation of the work that produced it. The decisions inside each phrase visible to anyone who knew how to read them, and the decisions themselves being the kind that only arrive from understanding the structure rather than executing the surface. Miles had called it playing from inside the house rather than describing it from the street. She played from inside the house. The second movement was slower. The Ravel sonatine's movement de minuet, a delicate, architecture-precise movement that most young players treated as a gentle interlude between the more dramatic outer movements. Cora treated it as the center. Miles had told her once that the middle movement of that piece was the one that separated understanding from execution. Anyone could play the first and third. The second required you to know what silence was for, what the space between notes was doing, why a rest was not an absence but a presence of a different kind. She played it as he had described it. She played the silences the same way she played the notes. In the 12th row, a man named Robert Chung, principal pianist with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, present as a guest of one of the competition's donors, turned to his wife and said something in a voice too low to hear. His wife looked at the stage. Stanton's pen was on the table. His hand was not on the pen. He was looking at the stage. He had been looking at the stage since the third phrase of the first movement, which was also when the angle of his chin had changed, though he did not know it. The expression that replaced his earlier one was not warm, not generous, not the expression of a man who is revising himself. It was something more specific, the expression of someone whose body has registered information that their position requires them not to acknowledge. The information and the requirement were in direct conflict, and the conflict was visible in the way certain people's faces reveal things they are not trying to reveal, in the quality of the stillness rather than in any specific feature. Cora played the third movement. The anime, quick, bright, technically demanding in a way that was structural rather than acrobatic. This was where lesser players let the demand become the performance. You played the difficulty and called it the music. Cora played the music and the difficulty came along. Her left hand in the repeated bass figure was consistent at a level that no amount of rehearsal at a conservatory could explain as rehearsal alone. It was the specific consistency of someone who had played the same phrases on the same instrument in the same room for 9 years until the physical intelligence of them was not a practiced thing but a known one. The kind of knowing that lives in the hands and does not need the brain to confirm it. The final phrase arrived. She played the last chord. Both hands. Clean. She held it for the resonance. Not the full resonance, the working resonance, the amount that the piece had earned rather than the amount that would impress. And then she lifted her hands from the keys and placed them in her lap. She looked at the music on the stand. The hall was quiet. Not the quiet of an audience holding its breath before applauding. The other kind. The kind that has a weight to it, where the people inside it are not yet ready to return to being people in an audience because they have been somewhere else and have not fully arrived back. 6 seconds passed. Then the applause started, and it was not the polite applause of a competition audience acknowledging a performance. It was the other kind. The unguarded kind. The kind that happens when a room has been given something it did not know it was going to receive and has no prepared response for it, and so it responds with everything it has. Diana Reeves stood up. She was applauding and she had stood before she decided to, which is the only way standing ovations that mean anything happen. Not from decision but from the body going where the moment takes it. She stood and she applauded and she looked at the stage. James Aldrich stood beside her 30 seconds later. Philip Stanton did not stand. He sat with his pen on the table and his hands in his lap and his eyes on the stage. He sat through the applause and he sat through Cora descending from the stage with her plastic folder under her arm, and he sat for the 43 seconds between her exit and the introduction of the next contestant, and nobody who saw him could have said afterward what his expression contained because it was not a single thing. It was the specific composite expression of a man who has made an assessment in a room and then had to sit in the room while the assessment was disproven at full volume, and who has not yet found the version of himself that knows what to do next. The competition's final results were tabulated after the 40th performance. The 3 judges submitted their scores to the tabulation team, a process that had been overseen by the same volunteer accountant for 11 years, and that was, by its own procedure, transparent and independently verified. When the scores came back, something was flagged. Diana Reeves had given Cora James a score of 98 out of 100. James Aldrich had given her a 96. Philip Stanton had given her a 79. A 79. The tabulation team's volunteer accountant, a woman named Sandra Park who had been doing this specific job for 11 consecutive years and who had a particular relationship to numerical anomaly, flagged the score on the basis of standard deviation. A 19-point gap between the highest and lowest scores for the same performance was outside the competition's stated acceptable variance by 11 points. The procedure for that situation was a review request to the competition's oversight board, which was separate from the adjudicating panel and which included 3 members of the Wentworth Foundation's Board of Trustees who had no adjudicating role. Sandra Park submitted the review request at 4:57 in the afternoon. The oversight board received it before the closing ceremony. The closing ceremony was scheduled for 6 o'clock. At 5:42, the Oversight Board's chair, a woman named Eleanor Tran who had been a trustee for 6 years and who had a background in financial compliance that had prepared her specifically for the recognition of anomaly patterns in recorded data, requested 28 years of scoring records from the competition's archive. The competition had digitized its records in 2009. Everything from 2009 forward was immediately available. She had 19 minutes. She did not need all of them. The pattern was visible in 14 minutes. In 28 years of competition, Philip Stanton's scores for black contestants had averaged 8.3 points lower than his co-panelists' scores for the same contestants. For contestants from non-conservatory backgrounds, the gap was 9.1 points. For black contestants from non-conservatory backgrounds, the gap was 11.7 points. The pattern held across every year, every panel composition change, every genre variation. It was not a sample size question. It was 28 years of the same thing. Eleanor Tran called the competition director at 5:59. The closing ceremony began at 6 o'clock. The results were announced. First place, Cora James. The announcement was made using the final tabulated score, which had been adjusted under the oversight provision to apply the panel median for the disputed score rather than the outlier. Stanton's 79 was replaced by the panel median of 97. With that adjustment, Cora's total score was the highest the competition had recorded in 11 years. Stanton was not at the adjudicators' table when the result was announced. He had left during the tabulation period. The chair where he had sat was empty. There was no dramatic exit. He was simply not there when the result was read. Cora stood at the front of the stage holding the $20,000 prize check. The host leaned toward her with the microphone. "Is there anything you'd like to say?" She looked at the 1,200 seats. At Diana Reeves, still in her adjudicator's chair, looking at her. At the contestants in their holding area seats along the sidewall. 39 of them who had also played today, most of whom were looking at her now with expressions that were not uniform. At the 42nd row where she knew Ruth was sitting, where she could not see Ruth's face from here but could locate the exact seat because she had looked at it twice during her performance. "I want to call my grandmother," she said. The room made a sound. Not quite laughter, not quite applause. Something between the two, the specific sound of 2,000 people releasing something they have been holding. "We can do that," the host said. He looked at the production team. They patched the call through the hall speakers. It rang 3 times. "Baby." Ruth's voice, flat and warm, filling Nishi Concert Hall through 1,200 watts of speaker system. "What's all that noise?" "Grandma. I won." A pause. Ruth's pauses had a texture, the texture of someone who thinks before they speak because what they say is meant to be accurate rather than immediate. "I know," Ruth said. "I watched it on the church live stream. Deacon Miles has been sitting here since 12:30. In 1,200 seats, nobody moved. He heard the whole thing," Ruth said. "He hasn't said a word since you started playing. He's been sitting here with his hands in his lap." A longer pause. The kind of pause that holds something specific inside it. "He's crying," Ruth said. "He says he doesn't want me to tell you that." The hall didn't explode into applause. It did something more considered. The sound built slowly, the way it builds when a room has understood something, not just felt it. When the people inside it have received information that changes the shape of what they were watching and are responding to the changed shape rather than to the original impression. Diana Reeves was still standing. She had been standing since the applause that followed Cora's performance, and she had not sat back down. She was the only person at the adjudicator's table. The chair to her right, where Stanton had been for 28 years, was empty. Cora stood on stage with the check in one hand and her plastic folder under her other arm, and the speakers still carrying Ruth's voice and Deacon Miles's presence in it, and she looked out at the hall with the expression she had brought into the building that morning. Level, unhurried, measuring, and she looked at that empty chair for a moment. Then she looked away. She had not come to this hall for the chair. The weeks after the competition moved at 2 speeds, quickly in the world outside and slowly where it mattered. The Wentworth Foundation's Oversight Board published its review findings 6 weeks after the final. The findings documented the statistical pattern across 28 years and identified it as a sustained adjudicative anomaly inconsistent with the competition's stated evaluation criteria. The language was measured and precise. It did not use the word bias. It did not need to. The finding was specific enough that the word arrived on its own in every reader's mind. Philip Stanton's name was not on the adjudicator's roster for the following year. The foundation announced a new evaluation framework. 3 independent scores, submitted blind to a verification board. Any score outside one standard deviation of the panel mean subject to automatic review. The system did not change because someone gave a speech. It changed because Sandra Park flagged a 79 and Eleanor Tran had 19 minutes. Sandra Park was not promoted. She was not interviewed. She kept her job and came back the following year and sat at the tabulation table and did exactly what she had always done. The only thing that changed was this. The oversight provision was now written into the competition's official charter with a specific reference to the 2024 procedure. Her process became the rule. That was her reform. Precise, permanent, and completely uncredited. Diana Reeves became the competition's lead adjudicator. In her first interview after the appointment, she was asked when she knew Cora James was exceptional. "I didn't," she said. "I put my pen down in the third phrase and I didn't know why. My hand put it down before I understood what I was hearing." She paused. That's not a story about her being exceptional. That's a story about what happens when someone plays from inside the music and you've been listening to people play from outside it for so long that you've forgotten what inside sounds like. She reminded me. Deacon Miles turned 70 on the 3rd Sunday of April. The New Life Baptist Church Fellowship Hall had a cake and a dinner and the whole congregation, and Ruth brought his favorite soup and Cora played the Baldwin upright. The same piano in the same storage room, though the door was open now so the fellowship hall could hear. She played the Ravel sonatine. All 3 movements. Miles sat in the folding chair beside the piano the way he had sat beside it for 9 years. When she finished, he was quiet for a while. Then he said the thing he had said exactly once before, the time she was 14, and played the pathetic. Again. From the 3rd movement. Watch the left hand in bar 41. Cora laughed. It was the first laugh this entire story had produced in her. Full and clear and unguarded. The specific quality of someone who has been carrying something serious for a long time and has found the one person in the world in whose presence they can set it down. She played it again. The fellowship hall full of people listened through the open door. The music went out into the afternoon and into the street, where a few people who were passing slowed down without knowing why and stood there for a while and then went on. The Baldwin upright needed tuning. It had always needed tuning. Miles had the same conversation with the church property manager about the tuning every 6 months, and the property manager agreed it needed tuning, and it remained untuned because the line item in the church budget was always the one that waited. Cora had won $20,000. She paid for the tuning the following week. The technician who came was a 60-year-old man named Frank who had been tuning instruments in South Los Angeles for 30 years and who, when he finished, played a single chord and listened to it and said, "That's a good piano. Been waiting on somebody." Cora was in the storage room when he said it. She looked at the Baldwin. The worn keys, the faded fullboard, the bench with the crack along the right edge that had been there since before she sat on it the first time. She put both hands on the keys. She played the opening note of the Ravel. C sharp. Single. Clear. The room was different with the tuning. The same room, the same acoustic specificity of old wood and folded chairs and coverless hymnals, but the note was different. It sat in the air the way the note at Nishi Concert Hall had sat in the air. It was the same note. The same hands. The same thing Miles had taught her in this room for 9 years. She had played it in a 1,200-seat hall for $20,000 and a panel of judges and 2,000 people, and the note was here. It had always been here. Wherever you are watching this from, drop your city in the comments. We started in Compton and we ended in a storage room, and the distance between those 2 points is exactly the length of the story. The story is everywhere. We want to know where it lands. If Cora's story puts something in your chest that you cannot immediately name, that is the note. That is what Miles heard through the floorboards for 9 years. That is what Diana Reeves's hand knew before her brain did. That is what a 28-year pattern of suppression could not prevent from arriving. It arrives. Eventually. In its own time, in its own room, through whatever door it has to go through. Subscribe to Noir Resurgence. Come back next week. Like this video if the note landed. Share it with whoever needs to hear it. There are more crawl spaces. More Baldwin uprights. More rooms that have been waiting. We will be here when the door opens.